Hello everyone and welcome back to another Daily Geometry Dash video, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use every camera trigger in Geometry Dash. So let's just open up our level. Right here, I have my level, and I'm on the 5th page on the trigger section, where we have all of our camera triggers. So we're going to start off with something super simple, and that is going to be zoom. So what zoom does is you just click edit object and it allows you to zoom in. It just allows you to zoom in the screen. It's a super simple one to use. It is quite possibly the easiest one to use out of them all. And yeah, there you go. That is the zoom trigger. We're now going to be moving on to static. And what static does is it's extremely simple. What you want to do with this is you just give it a group ID. Right here I have 1, and I have an object that I'm going to put right here with the group ID of 1, and what's going to happen is it's just going to dictate where the camera actually is, and it's just going to basically keep it static, if not moving back a tiny bit. So that's how to use the static trigger. Now we're going to be moving on to the offset trigger, which is again incredibly simple. It just allows you to apply an offset to the camera. For example, with this, you can see 10 blocks in front of you. So you just can't see the player itself. You just have to memorize where the player is. That's a pretty cool one. Now we're going to be moving on to GPU off. So edit object and just offset. And if I offset it even further, like that, it's basically just another way to do an offset trigger. Oh, 3, 2, 1. So the GPU off trigger is essentially a static trigger combined with an offset trigger. So what you can do is you can do something like this, where it goes 3 blocks on the Y, or around 3 blocks on the Y, and it goes around 3 blocks on the X as well. And what it allows it to do is it just moves it. So if I make it a bigger change, obviously it tends a little bit too much, like 50, it just keeps you static until you reach that point of the camera. So now we're going to be moving on to the next trigger, which is the rotate camera trigger. So what this just allows you to do is it just allows you to rotate the camera without affecting anything else, without affecting any physics, without affecting anything. So if I have like 9 seconds to go 65 degrees, it's going to look something like this. And then you can also have like a speed up going on where you're sliding down the slope as you're going. It can be pretty cool. It can be pretty cool. There are a lot of things that you can do with the rotate trigger as well. We're now going to be getting onto the edge trigger. So we just need to set it. We just need to do that. Let's just say right. And what we can do is just place down an object once again. With this group ID, select the edge trigger, select the group ID, and that becomes the edge of the screen. So what I can do now is I can move this anywhere and make that the edge of the screen. I can also do that, but it's gonna break as it is, off screen, and when it gets on screen, it will just have a really smooth easel. So that is how to use the edge camera trigger. Now we're going to be moving on to the mode trigger, and what you just do with this is you just do free mode and you turn on this, for example, and what it does is it just enables free flight and stuff like that with the wave, the ship, the UFO, stuff like that. It just removes the boundaries of the level, essentially, for the game modes that actually have them. And now we have the guide trigger, which basically just gives you a guide. It's kind of just a debug thing, just tells you what an offset would look like, what stuff would look like. It's really, really simple. Doesn't really affect the player. So, yeah. It just allows you to preview the camera bound specified zoom and offset values for different aspect ratios. The inner line is the guaranteed view 4:3, and the outer line is based on your window aspect ratio. It's good for when you're making stuff that you want to appear on every single device, but apart from that, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose in and of itself, and you are probably going to be removing this before uploading your levels. So the first trigger, the shader trigger itself, just allows you to select what gets affected by the shader trigger, by the shader triggers. So it's an insanely simple one. We're not going to do any real setup on this. We're just going to make it affect the background, middle ground, just the background and middle ground. There we go. And I'm just going to click OK. And this one we're going to keep just here. So, number one, we have the shockwave. You can control the speed of the shockwave, making the shockwave be faster, as you can see, by me scrolling by. We can control the thickness of the shockwave. It just controls how thick it is. As you can see, now it has ripples, effectively, because of how thick it has to be. If we do the fade in and time off and screen off, it basically just means it is now going to happen here instead. And there's going to be off screen, and it's going to be a little bit off time with you hitting it. Now, the strength. This basically just changes how much distortion the thing creates. Like right now, you can see it creates basically none. And the max size, changing that basically makes it instant. I need to also add some strength. The max size just seems to, and so yeah, the max size just changes the max size of the thing. So yep, and that is the shockwave trigger. Next, the shock line, which is the shockwave trigger, except in a line. Everything here is the same. So, apart from these invert, flip, rotate, dual, target, and relative, everything here is the same. Everything here works the same. Next, glitch trigger. So, as you can see right here on the bottom, the glitch trigger is affecting this. So we're just going to be seeing it through that. So we can change the fade time, the speed, the slide height, the max color, and the max color off can also be changed. As well as the strength. Like right now I played around with it a lot, so it's basically invisible. But if I make these visible again, we'll see the actual thing. Yep, as you can see, we can see a little bit of it while still having pretty low strength. Next, the chromatic shader trigger. We're just going to click Edit Object, and we're just going to do Target X, Target Y, fade time, easing it out. Now this one, we're just going to remove our setup for. We're just going to remove our setup, and we're going to add a bunch of objects here. So when you do this, you might know, 3, 2, 1. So when you do this, you might notice that there's no actual change. That is because you also need to enable use X and use Y, or use X or use Y, depending on which one you want. And it's going to apply this glitchy effect as well. Next, we're going to be moving on to the next shader trigger, which in our case is the chromatic glitch. So as you can see, if I lower the speed, lower the strength, line thickness, line strength, and stuff like that. You can see it changes the lines in the background and the way that the glitch works. I made it pretty floaty just now. It also works with objects as well. It is now just insanely floaty. So yeah, the RGB off just changes how big of an offset you have between the RGB and the actual line. The fade time changes the fade time, and the segment height, or the segment H, changes the segment height. That is the chromatic glitch trigger. You can't really see it. There we go. Yeah. Next, we have the Pixelate trigger. And so we just click Edit Object. We click, we select, like, for example, 2.02 target X, and we're just going to type that same thing in here. 2.02. Use X, use Y. And as you can see, we've made the game pixelated. As you can see, we can change the fade time, we can give hard edges, we can give it an easing as well. And there we go. We now have a pixelated ship game mode in Geometry Dash. There we go. Now we're just gonna move on to the next page of shader triggers, starting with lens circle. So here we can change the size of the lens circle, the fade time, the screen off on the x-axis, the center ID. We can change the fade time, the strength, the screen off y-axis, and the tint channel. So basically right now what it looks like is this. It's basically a vignette trigger. Just gives you a vignette. Looks pretty cool. And what we can do, for example, is make it really small so that it becomes a flashlight effect, for example. That works. We can change the screen off like that, make the fade time longer. And so you go into a part where you can only see what's in front of you and you have to avoid it out of feel. That can be quite cool. And yeah, that is basically the lens circle trigger. Next, we're moving on to the radial blur, which is pretty self-explanatory. It just blurs in a radius. What you can change is the size, the intensity, the fade time, and the fade time, the screen off X, screen off Y, and some other stuff. If I click target, for example, center ID, just player 1, which gives a lens circle around the player. You can't really see it as well. You can see it right there, but we don't have any objects, so it's a bit more difficult to spot. But it does do it. It does do its job. Next, the motion blur trigger. This one's also quite simple. It might look complicated, but this is insanely simple. Target X, just the target X. Target Y, ref channel, follow ease, fade time, fade, follow ease again, intensity, and target ID. I'll just do player 1, intensity, and we should become really good to show the trigger. Fuck me. Return 1, you also gotta remember to use XY and use X and use Y. And now I can just show it to you. Yo, that actually looks like a pretty cool effect for a level. Someone might end up using it. This one probably has already used it. Anyway, moving on to the next trigger. Bulge. If I just go over here, as you can see, it just makes the screen bulge, just like that. We can do edit object, we can change the bulge, we can change the radius of the bulge, the screen off X, screen off Y, as well as the fade time, and we can also give it a target of player 1. So that means that around player 1, the screen bulges. So if I, for example, had a spike right here, what would happen is that spike would basically appear to be off axis. It's a pretty cool one. Pretty cool one. The spike seems to be like flying around and stuff. That's pretty cool. Next trigger, we have the pinch trigger. If we go forward, it does nothing yet. So if we edit object, we enable use X and use Y. Does it work? No, it doesn't. If we edit the object again, we can see why. There's no radius, and there we go. Now what we can do is give it an easing. We can change the screen off X, screen off Y, but I've already showcased both of these, so these are pretty self-explanatory. I'll showcase the spawn trigger mechanic. Edit group 1. Basically what you need to do when you're making a spawn trigger, you just need to set this to a loop. Go to the spawn triggers, which are right over here. Group ID 1. You can do a delay with a variation, and instead of running at the triggers location, it will run at the spawn triggers location, which means you can have all of your triggers at the very start of the level on different groups, and you can just place down a spawn trigger with that necessary group at the part that it actually needs to be used in. So that's the spawn trigger as well. Next, we have the Grayscale trigger. Pretty self-explanatory. It makes it grayscale. If we edit the object, you'll see there's not really that much we can change. You can make it a bit darker. You can give it an easing, and that's it. With the tint channels, I believe that is just color ID. I'm going to be inclined to go with that being color ID. So let me just make a color ID for this. So if we tint it bright red, what's going to happen is, instead of being grayscale, the trigger will just make it red instead. And if I place it further away, in this way, we can go grayscale and then red from the grayscale. So yeah, overall, the tint channels can be very useful. Next, now we've gone over grayscale, it's time to go over sepia, which just makes it this cool yellowish sepia effect. If we click Edit Object, we can just change the target, which basically just changes the power of the effect. That's about it. And the fade time, as well as the easing. You can also click this thing, just basically disables it in editor preview, so you never want to click it. And there we go. That is the sepia trigger. Next, invert color. It's very explanatory. Once again, it just inverts the color. So we just click Edit Object. We can edit the actual RGB values as well. We can change the power of the trigger, change the fade time, and select like Edit RGB. We can select Tween RGB, and basically create this cool stuff. We can just mess around with it. And yeah, that is the invert colors. You can use that just for a hue shift. Speaking of hue shift, here's the hue trigger. If we just go like 90 degrees, there we go, with an easing, we'll see that the hue trigger just changes the hue of the level. It's useful. It is useful for very precise color changes. Edit color. If we click Edit Object, we can just go changing the base of the level, essentially. So I do that, and what's going to end up happening is it's going to look something like that. And it looks pretty cool. It is right now it is a bit of a powerful one, so that's just basically inverted again. Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. Next, we have the final one, split screen. And if we click edit object, you'll see we have target X, target Y, and fade time. It's once again one of those triggers that you might think it just doesn't work, but that's because you have to go inside of it and click these two buttons. And split screen, target X, there you go. And it just works. You have to click those three buttons and it's just gonna work. Although this isn't really all that usable, unless you have like a super repetitive part and you want to make it look a little bit cooler. So you'll always know exactly where you are. That's the only one. That's the only use case I really see here. And that concludes this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!